At 51, Arthur Lane had grown used to being invisible. Asterisk, he arrived every morning before dawn, keys jangling from his belt, and left long after the last junior executive scurried into a town car. He moved through the high-rise offices of Stratton. Enterprises like a ghost scene, but not noticed, present but never acknowledged. The only consistent thing people remembered about him was the slow rhythm of his mop across the lobby floor, and maybe the faint whistle of old jazz tunes echoing off the marble walls. Asterisk, Arthur didn't mind. Not really. In fact, he preferred the quiet. He'd lived enough life before he took the janitor job 20 years ago after a series of personal disasters to know that peace was worth more than recognition. In another lifetime, he'd been a promising carpenter, a father, even a man in love. But tragedy had carved holes into that version of him, one after another, until he found solace in routine and predictability. Asterisk, the skyscraper itself was a modern marvel, 58 floors of glass and steel towering over midtown Manhattan. Stratton Enterprises was one of the city's top tech firms, led by the famously brilliant and notoriously guarded CEO Vivian Stratton. She had built the company from a garage startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. People revered her, feared her, and whispered about her private life, which included a single daughter. Emily, rarely seen in public. Arthur had seen her only a handful of times, once during a charity event in the lobby, and again, briefly, when she had visited the upper floors. Young, probably in her mid-20s, she had the same poise and sharp features as her mother, but none of the coldness. Arthur had noticed her smile, quick and genuine, when she greeted the doorman. But like everyone else, she walked past Arthur as if he were part of the wallpaper. Asterisk, it was a Thursday night. Just after 8 p.m., the skies had opened up into a summer. Storm rain lashing against the tall windows, thunder rolling low like a warning. Most of the office staff had cleared out early. Only a few lights blinked in the upper floors, and the lobby had gone silent. Arthur was finishing up his usual rotation, whistling a Louis Armstrong tune, mop gliding across the polished floor. Asterisk, he was about to take the elevator to the underground levels, the parking garage and storage area, when something made him pause. Asterisk, a scream. Asterisk, faint, but sharp. Not the kind of scream that came from someone losing their balance or getting startled. This one cut through the sound of rain and concrete like a blade. Asterisk. Arthur dropped the mop. Asterisk. He moved fast for a man in his 50s. Instincts honed from his younger, rougher days kicking in. He jammed the elevator button, heart thumping hard as it rumbled downward. By the time the doors opened into the dimly lit garage, the scream had stopped, but he caught the sound of a struggle. A car door slamming, muffled shouting, something scraping against the floor. Asterisk, the garage was nearly empty, echoing with the hum of fluorescent lights and the steady beat of rain pouring in from a side vent. Arthur crouched low and followed the noise, his boots soft on the concrete. Near the far corner of the garage, behind a row of black sedans, he saw it. Asterisk, a man tall, wearing a black hoodie and mask, was yanking at the back door of a sleek luxury town car. Inside, a woman was struggling, kicking hard, her wrists bound. In front of her with a zip tie. Her eyes were wide with terror. Asterisk, Arthur didn't need a second look to recognize her. It was Emily Stratton. Asterisk, before he could think, the man turned startled by Arthur's presence. He let go of the car door and pulled a blade from his waistband. Asterisk, back off, old man, he barked. His voice was low, shaking slightly. Asterisk, Arthur didn't stop moving. His eyes darted to a nearby utility rack where a tire iron hung on a hook, left there by the garage crew earlier in the day. He grabbed it, raising it slowly as he took a step forward. Asterisk, you don't want to do this, Arthur said. his voice low and even. "Walk away now, and this doesn't have to get worse." The man lunged. Arthur sidestepped quickly, the blade nicking his shoulder. Pain seared through the fabric of his uniform, but he gritted his teeth and swung the tire iron in a wide arc. It connected hard with the attacker's arm, sending the knife clattering across the garage floor. Asterisk, the two men struggled, one with raw panic, the other with silent, focused rage. Arthur fought like a man who had nothing to prove, but everything to protect. His years of quiet solitude peeled away in seconds. He absorbed a punch to the gut, took another cut on his forearm, and finally landed a crushing blow to the side of the attacker's head. The man dropped like a stone. Asterisk Emily kicked open the car door, falling to her knees, shaking and gasping for breath. Asterisk Arthur knelt beside her, blood trickling down his arm. "You okay?" he asked gently. Asterisk she nodded, tears spilling over. "He tried to grab me ... I thought I was going to die ... Asterisk Arthur didn't say anything. He just pulled a pocket knife from his belt and cut the zip tie from her wrists. Then he pulled out his phone, dialing 911 with steady fingers. Asterisk Stratton Enterprises parking garage, he told the operator. Attempted abduction. Suspect unconscious. Victim safe. Asterisk the entire building was swarming within minutes. Police. Paramedics. Vivian Stratton herself arrived not long after, surrounded by bodyguards and assistants. She rushed straight past them all and dropped to her knees beside her daughter, clutching her tightly. When she looked up and saw Arthur, her eyes narrowed not in suspicion, but in disbelief. "You saved her," she whispered. Arthur stood there, soaked in rain and sweat, holding a bloodied towel to his shoulder. "Just happened to be in the right place," he muttered. But it was more than that. The garage security footage later revealed everything. The way he had moved without hesitation. The way he had shielded Emily with his own body. The moment he calmly stepped between a knife-wielding man and a stranger's child without flinching. Asterisk in that one moment, Arthur Lane had become someone else entirely, not just the janitor. Not just the silent background character of a corporate machine. He had stepped out of the shadows and into the spotlight of something raw and real and unforgettable. And for the first time in over 20 years, people started to see him. Not as a cleaner, but as a protector. A man with a story no one had bothered to ask about until now. Arthur Lane didn't expect anything to change. Asterisk he returned to work the following Monday, his shoulder stiff under the fresh bandages, his arm wrapped in gauze beneath the blue sleeves of his uniform. The doctors had offered him a few days off, but he'd politely declined. Routine helped him heal. Always had. Mopping floors and checking lights gave his mind something to do besides relive the moment he'd nearly died. Asterisk he arrived just after dawn, as usual, and stepped into the building through the service entrance. But something was different. Asterisk the air had shifted. Asterisk people turned to look at him. Not just the usual tired security guard who offered him a morning nod, but everyone. A junior executive holding a tablet stepped aside with an awkward, reverent, "Good morning, sir." A woman from HR smiled and held the elevator. The mail clerk even called out, "Glad you're back, Mr. Lane." Mr. Lane, it felt strange. Asterisk he said little, as always, but inside he felt something stir, a warmth he hadn't known in years. He headed up to the 6th floor for his first cleaning round and found it already spotless. Asterisk, a sticky note sat on his cart. "We've got this covered. Today. Take a break. Facilities team." Arthur blinked. At first, he thought it was a mistake or maybe an overreaction. But then, around noon, he received a call on his company-issued flip phone. It was the building director. Asterisk. The CEO wants to see you." Arthur felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He hadn't spoken to Vivian Stratton directly since the night of the attack. She'd said thank you then barely audible through the chaos, but the rest had been sirens, police reports, and a stream of media outside the building the next morning. Photos of Arthur had surfaced across news sites. Janitor saves CEO's daughter in dramatic rescue. Hero of Midtown, the man behind the mop. Arthur hadn't read any of them. He didn't care for the attention. He'd never even updated his Facebook profile since 2012. But the outside world suddenly knew his name. He arrived at the top floor, nervous despite himself. Vivian's office was all glass and power-stark white furniture. Chrome edges, a view that made the Empire State Building look short. Her assistant ushered Arthur in with a respectful nod, and for the first time, the janitor stood in the presence of one of the most powerful women in the country, not as a shadow in the background, but as a man whose actions had changed everything. Vivian rose from her chair and walked around the desk. She was taller than he remembered. Or maybe it was the heels. She wore a dark pantsuit and minimal makeup, but her presence was electric. There was no handshake, no corporate nicety. She stood in front of him and said simply, "You saved my daughter's life. That's not something I can ever repay, but I intend to try." Arthur looked down, uncomfortable. "I wasn't looking for anything. I just, did what most people wouldn't," she interrupted. "And that's why we're here." She gestured toward a chair, and he sat. Then she walked back to her desk and slid over a folder. "I've reviewed your employment record. Never a sick day, never late. Excellent evaluations from every facilities manager we've had. And until last week, not one person upstairs knew your name." Arthur stayed quiet. Vivian opened the folder. "You worked construction in your 20s, right? Special projects team. OSHA certified. 2 apprenticeships." "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice low. "A long time ago." She nodded. "Well, I've created a new position. Director of Workplace Safety. It's yours, if you want it. Office on the 10th floor. Full benefits, 6-figure salary, team of 5 under you. You'll oversee building security from the ground level up. Not as a guard, but as someone who knows where the blind spots are. You've already proven that." Arthur stared at her. "I don't have the kind of education," he began. "You have experience, instinct, and courage. That's worth more than any MBA." He looked out the window, down at the streets where he used to catch the early morning bus before most people had even woken up. He thought of his late wife, Marie, and their son gone too soon in a car accident that had fractured his world. He thought of all the years spent in silence, unnoticed, surviving. Then he looked back at Vivian. "I'll take it, but only if I still get to check the boiler room once a week." She smiled, for the first time since he'd entered. "Deal." The transformation was almost immediate. Within days, Arthur had traded his janitor blues for a crisp navy suit and a security badge with the Stratton Enterprises crest. His name was added to the directory. An office was furnished with a window view and a sleek nameplate. Arthur Lane, Director of Safety and Operations. The cleaning staff still called him Mr. Lane, but now with pride in their voices. He insisted on eating in the break room with them, same as always. The difference was now, others started joining too. The office began to change in more subtle ways. People began acknowledging the custodial team. Executives started asking questions about safety protocols they'd previously ignored. Arthur installed panic buttons in the underground garage, rearranged the security shift rotation, and instituted a mandatory self-defense course for interns and assistants. The place ran smoother, safer, smarter. One morning, a courier arrived with a framed certificate from the mayor's office, thanking him for extraordinary civic bravery. It now hung behind his desk, though Arthur always said it looked better in the janitor's closet. Then there was Emily. She visited often. Sometimes with a coffee, sometimes just to chat. She'd been shaken by the attack more than she let on. But Arthur's presence calmed her. They would sit in his office, talking about books, music, even old films. She once asked him if he missed anything about his old life. I miss how quiet it used to be, he said, smiling. But I think I like this better. She laughed, and it became a kind of ritual. Once a week, she brought him her mother's fancy cappuccinos and said, I'm checking in on my bodyguard. He'd roll his eyes, but secretly, he never looked forward to anything more. One day, she asked him if he ever regretted being a janitor all those years. He thought for a long moment, then shook his head. Those years helped me learn to listen, to observe. People show you who they are when they think you're invisible. And sometimes, knowing how to disappear teaches you exactly how to step up when it counts. The silence that followed felt like understanding. By the end of that year, Arthur Lane was no longer just a man with a mop. He was a symbol of humility, courage, and second chances. Stratton Enterprises had seen many heroes before in the form of coders and executives. But Arthur reminded them of something simpler and more powerful. Greatness doesn't always look the way you expect. And while the marble floors still shone and the boardrooms buzzed, people no longer walked past the custodial staff without a word. They saw them. They saw him. Because once, in the quiet dark of a rainy garage, a 51-year-old janitor had stood between danger and innocence, and rewrote not just his own story, but the soul of an entire company. And they never looked at him the same way again.